Welcome back to Mic Check. My name is Zach, and over here I got my buddy David. Say hello to the internet.
Welcome back, everyone. Good to be alongside you yet again, Zach, and an eventful week we had, and looking forward to going over everything and looking forward to next week here at Miami.
Yeah, we don't got anything to talk about on the show. I think it's going to be, I don't think anything happened this week, so we'll just pack it up and go home, right?
Hey, it's all up to you. I know that we constantly talk about things that are going on, whether it's racing or not, but I think we might have a few ideas.
Well, thank you for joining us here on YouTube at Sim Racing Media. Like I said, my name's Zach, and over here's my buddy David. And here on Mic Check, we try to bridge the gap between real-world motorsport. And this time of year, we focus on NASCAR and the sim racing world that Sim Racing Media is so familiar with bringing to life. And we try really hard on this show to talk different news that comes from both of those worlds and merge them together on one talk show between two buddies. And every now and again, we'll grab a guest or two and see what we can do. But taking a look here at our rundown, of course, just like always, we got our weekend recaps. Man, there's a lot that went on this weekend on the Xfinity and on the Cup side, and there's a lot to unpack from those races at Las Vegas. I'm glad you're here with me, David, because there's a lot to go over. But we have the thing that the internet just seems to not get enough of, which is the Bubba Wallace, Kyle Larson drama. Thank goodness we kind of waited till late in the week to kind of get a full picture of what's going on with that. We're going to unpack that with you right here on Sim Racing Media. We also have a preview for Homestead Miami. Who are the drivers that we expect are going to be running that high line, trying to get out in front, especially in the next gens? A whole new beast. They've never been here in this car. A lot to unpack there. And as you can see, what's left here on the rundown, we're going to stay faithful to our running order today. And I'm excited. I hope you are too, to get buckled in. And can I get a mic check for what's going on with what we have here on our rundown? But David, we're going to talk briefly about the week that was, and for this, I'm going to have to say goodbye to you because I have to put up the Xfinity results over your face. But so wave goodbye, wave as you fade into the background. Okay, here we are. We have the Xfinity results on the side of the screen, and you can see here that there are some names up here that are worth mentioning that I feel deserve a shout out. But first and foremost, we got to see Josh Berry overcome some pretty big adversity in Las Vegas. He got in a similar incident as Bubba Wallace did later on in that weekend, I guess I should say. And Berry recovered to secure a victory for the JR Motorsports driver that kind of gets overshadowed by the roster over there at Junior Motorsports. And what a feel-good story Josh Berry is, right? The guy who kind of made Dale Jr.'s dirt track team a success, and Berry finally getting a shot in this level of NASCAR. And there was so much pressure on him to perform, and Berry continues a pretty solid playoff run here in the number 8 machine. And news this week, very similar to the AJ Allmendinger story that we covered on this show last week. Josh Berry gets signed to an extension with JR Motorsports to drive the number 8 car for 2023, securing his future. He kind of gets a weight off of his shoulders as Dale Jr. secures one of the more premier drivers in the Xfinity roster that seems like every day is growing a little more thin in talent. Good news for Junior Motorsports. They continue to secure high-end talent on their roster. As you can see throughout this chart, we see guys that we are very used to seeing up front. Noah Gragson, Justin Allgaiers, they continue to battle for a championship performance. But the guy I want to talk about today specifically is the man who finished 5th today in the number 18 ride for Joe Gibbs Racing. We have Trevor Bayne. And it was talked about on the show last week that Trevor Bayne really doesn't have a lot of expectations beyond 2022 in his racing career. He had to step away from the sport given his medical condition that really sidelined him, brought him out of the spotlight of NASCAR and into a private family life as he focused on recovery. And he still continues to move through some medical difficulties that will affect the rest of his life. If you don't know Trevor Bayne's story, I encourage you to do some research on your own behalf. It's really inspirational, but the road back to NASCAR for Trevor Bayne was not guaranteed, and he has said on Motor Hub on Fox Sports that he doesn't have any plans for 2023. He has no expectations for what comes in the next year. He has already lost a NASCAR career and has picked one back up this year with the Select Motorsports, with the Select Racing opportunities from Joe Gibbs Racing. In my opinion, seeing that number 18 car not finish in first behind, with the driver Trevor Bayne behind the wheel, is a bit disappointing. You kind of expect that 18 ride. It is the premier ride over there. They give that out to a select few drivers. Unfortunately, Trevor couldn't get it done, but he does nab a top 5 here. He continues to put together good runs. I'm very excited to see what Trevor Bayne does here in the next year or so. Let's see what opportunities unfold for him moving into next season. I'm going to bring David back here, but David, I do want to talk about junior motorsports here a little bit more with you. There was some big news this past week about Dale Jr. kind of getting spooked out of buying a NASCAR Cup Series charter, and he's spooked because the prices for these charters just keep going up and up and up. And he says at some point the bubble's got to burst, and those prices have got to decrease down into normal levels again. He had an opportunity 4 or 5 years ago to buy a charter, and he said on the Dale Jr. download he sort of regrets not jumping at that opportunity because it would be a miracle to get that price in today's world. And now that opportunity has not presented itself. What do you see as we go over Xfinity results and you see Junior Motorsports 1, 2, 3, you see the re-signing of Josh Berry and the orientation of Dale Jr. this week saying, you know what, I think I'm out. What does that say to the larger sport of NASCAR as its most popular figure in Dale Jr. Kind of pumps the brakes on Cup and kind of revitalizes himself in the Xfinity Series?
So Junior Motorsports, as you mentioned, great stable over there right now in the Xfinity Series. Some great drivers really showing off their talent, what they've got there in that series. But as far as moving into the Cup Series, I think I have to agree with Junior's take on the cost of a charter. Is it really worth going out and getting a charter and trying to start a Cup team? You have to buy all this equipment. You now have all these single source parts that some teams, at least earlier on this year, were complaining about being able to get them in and making sure that they had enough inventory to keep running these cars. Haven't heard as much of that lately, of course. So hopefully some of that's starting to stabilize, but it just brings questions in as somebody who would be looking towards that ownership. Would it be a good investment? For Dale Jr. at this time and having the success that his team is having at the Xfinity level, I think he is perfectly on par, holding off for now and hoping to find some opportunities on down the road.
Yeah, and you do kind of need a good recruitment program, I guess, that's good for developing cars into the Xfinity Series, or into the Cup Series rather, and definitely something that we should take note of as fans of the sport is Junior kind of doubles down and says, you know what, I think I'm going to stay down here. Another thing worth mentioning that happened this weekend at Las Vegas on the Xfinity Series side, and then I'll stop talking, David, and you can have all of your time with the Cup Series drivers. But something that was interesting that happened this past weekend was Hailie Deegan had her first opportunity in a Xfinity Series ride, and the popular Truck Series driver was under some pretty big scrutiny, as she has, as many people would argue, has underperformed in her equipment over there in the Truck Series this year. A lot of it in the beginning of the year was just unfortunate circumstances and things outside of their control, but that truck that she's driving over there in the Camping World Truck Series is a better truck than what Deegan's had results for. Now, there was much speculation around Hailie Deegan and her success coming from ARCA into some of these higher disciplines of NASCAR. And one of the first criticisms that was spoken is that the Truck Series right now, in terms of a developmental league, is like the wild, wild west. There's no holds bars, right? You can tear those things up and they can keep on going. They're tough vehicles. It's the Truck Series. You beat and bang on each other. There's little respect given out there, and there's not a lot of discipline that goes into driving those forms of vehicles versus an Xfinity Series car or the Cup Series car even, which some would argue now in the age that we live in, the Xfinity car is the harder one to drive. And folks said Deacon's probably going to struggle here because there's less finesse, there's less nuances in a truck where you can just beat and bang and throw elbows and kind of muscle your way around. She needs to be in a ride where she can show off her racing skills. And don't you know, she managed to get a Xfinity Series ride this weekend at Las Vegas, and that girl finished 13th. So congratulations to Hailie Deegan, highest finishing position in Xfinity Series history from a woman making her start, and very impressive out here managing those Xfinity Series rides.
And as you mentioned, probably one of the more difficult cars within NASCAR series right now to kind of adjust to. As you mentioned, coming from the trucks, which you can just kind of bang around and beat on other drivers, to an Xfinity car where one wrong tap and that might be the rest of your day right there, and everything's done in those cars. So getting some experience, definitely securing a good finish. Nothing to balk at there, right? A 13th place finish here at Las Vegas. Great stuff, and looking forward to seeing potential future for Deegan within the Xfinity Series there, and getting an opportunity to race a few more.
Absolutely. Well, David, I'm going to fade into obscurity now, and you can talk about the Cup Series results and have a chuckle or two over MSN's pictures of many of these Cup drivers. Last week they were really updated, and, well, you can take a look for yourself.
All right, so taking a look here at our results from Las Vegas. Joey Logano, our winner here late at Vegas, getting the right call, putting some new rubber on that car, running his way to the front. Very exciting finish there. I know I was finding myself cheering for Ross Chastain. Just hold him off. Just one more block. Let's go, Chastain. And sadly, he couldn't get it done. Couldn't hold him off quite long enough to secure that victory. But a great run from the number one there. Ross Chastain really doing his best with the equipment that he has, fighting his way to the front, and then, of course, trying to hold off Logano there for that win. In third, we have Kyle Busch. Also was making a late run towards the front, was getting some stuff done, but just didn't have enough time to chase down Ross or Joey there come the end of the race. Chase Briscoe finishing in fourth. Denny Hamlin there in fifth. Tyler Reddick coming home in sixth. Martin Truex Jr., pretty interesting day for him, starting from the back and making his way up here to the front to the top 10. Eric Jones in the eighth position, AJ Allmendinger in ninth, and then Austin Dillon rounding out the top 10. But this was definitely a race that had its moments, right? And everything just kind of back to back to back started happening, and we had drivers getting loose and drivers driving up by the wall, and Zach, and I'd really love to pull you back in. Love to hear your thoughts. This was some close racing. There were points where drivers were 4, and I believe at one point in time on one of those restarts, 5 wide here at Vegas. Would just love to hear some of your thoughts as to how these drivers were able to manage those cars in 5 wide conditions at some points.
Yeah, so David, there's a lot to go off of here when we look at the Cup Series finishing results, because when I look at these results, there are a ton of storylines that cannot be ignored. One of the first ones I see is finishing P3 is Kyle Busch. I have no idea how Kyle Busch wound up finishing where he finished at the end of this thing, because on the second to last caution, Kyle Busch went down pit road and lost a wheel on pit road. Of course, that's a 4-race vacation for his crew chief and his tire changer and the jack man and all the people involved on pit road that made that failure happen. But we got to see Kyle Busch go from the very back of the pack, and he finished third. That's an incredible run. Of course, the storyline of Joey Logano getting locking his way into the championship 4. He can race these next couple races with reckless abandon. You know, I don't really care what happens. I'm going to race at Phoenix, and that's all that matters. And another driver that we talked about on the show last week, that he's the underdog of the field. It's Chase Briscoe in that Stewart Haas 14 machine. Where does this guy come from? He was a lap down early in this race. He was awful, and yet fought and clawed his way all day long to finish inside, I think he finished 4th, right? Inside the top 5, and just an incredible effort by Chase Briscoe to manage his day and to have a very, very strong run. I love that. Of course, there are names that are on the outside of that top 10 list that we do not see. I instantly think of Christopher Bell, which we're going to talk about here in a moment with the Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson stuff. And I also think of Chase Elliott, our points leader. Didn't I say on this last show, it's the first race of every round he's really bad at? David, he wasn't even relevant all day long. Chase Elliott was struggling to be in the top 20 all day long. Just did not have the speed. That 9 team needs to figure it out, man, as they have used a lot of their points cushion.
They certainly have, and I'm glad you brought up Chase Elliott, because if you remember last week, I was picking drivers to make that Champ 4, and of course, one of the names making me proud and locking himself in early so I can wipe that one off, and whoo, got one of my drivers in there. But Chase Elliott, just having struggles all day long, was uncomfortable with that race car. They just couldn't really seem to find the speed and get something to get Chase a couple more positions, get him up into the top 10 and be competitive. The 9 team just struggling all day long. But as we know, as you also mentioned last week, this is not one of Chase's favored tracks. In fact, this is probably one of his least favorite tracks on the schedule. So if there's ever a time to have a race where you're not doing good, at least it's at a track you know that, hey, I'm not good here. I don't like this track. And then moving forward, you have Miami. Plenty of opportunities to look forward to. They're running the same tire, so hopefully they got lots of data from Las Vegas about what they can do with the tire sets then at Miami.
Absolutely. And David, let's continue on in the show, because that's a lot of recap, and I feel like we haven't even started the biggest story. The biggest story of the weekend, of course, the world's been talking about it. The Hook by Bubba Wallace on, Kyle Larson, the defending series champion. Of course, he's out of the playoffs, and Bubba Wallace apparently does not lift, as Bubba Wallace. Let's just call a spade, right? He right hooked him at the most dangerous part of the track, uh, in a car that all year long has been talked about with safety issues, and Bubba Wallace is piloting the car, who his teammate just had to step out of and retire early because of concussion issues. Many layers to this story. The retaliation, as Larson sends it into 3 and 4 on the bottom of 3 wide battle. Harvick backs out of it in the middle of the corner, and Larson admittedly messed up. He's one of the most talented drivers in the field, and we saw Kyle Larson run out of talent on Sunday. And unfortunately, he did not touch Bubba Wallace, though, but it ended up in Bubba Wallace getting in the wall. A very similar incident to what Josh Berry got through and won the Xfinity race with. He could have kept going, but apparently, according to Bubba Wallace in a post-race interview, he said, I hit the wall like that, my steering's broke. You just got to say that, right, for legal reasons, I guess, in the eyes of NASCAR. And ultimately, we got to see this pan out in a lot of discourse over the week, with tons of names from motorsport chipping in, and really, it's unfortunate, right? When Bubba Wallace is having, at least the second half of this year, a banner year, he really has turned it on. He's won a race. He's come close to winning others this year, and this is what they're going to remember him for. And Kyle Larson showing in the infield, not swinging at Bubba as he walked down and tried to fight him, showing why he's the champion of the sport, kind of refraining from that. And ultimately, it lands Bubba Wallace a 1-race suspension. John Hunter Nemechek will be piloting the 45 machine for 2311. So that's a very interesting roster, as we have Ty Gibbs and John Hunter Nemechek, now 2 of the youngest drivers in the field, going for 2311, one of the youngest teams in NASCAR. That'll be interesting next week at Homestead. But David, your thoughts on the Bubba Wallace versus Kyle Larson stuff. Let's start here. Did NASCAR get it right with the 1-race suspension?
I find it hard to accept that a 1-race suspension really puts it in any driver's head. So let's remove Bubba Wallace. Let's remove Kyle Larson for names just as a moment. Were this to happen with any 2 other drivers in the field, would NASCAR have taken the same steps? Would there be a suspension at all? I think that NASCAR definitely would have a suspension, regardless of who the drivers were involved. But perhaps the suspension would have been a bit longer had it not been Bubba Wallace and Kyle Larson. Just dangerous moves. And it was talked about immediately right in the broadcast. You can't just get to the rear quarter panel of a car and essentially turn them up into the wall. These cars are moving at that point in the turn around 180 miles an hour plus. To take an impact, regardless of where that impact is going to end up on that car. In this case, it was Larson's driver's side mainly that took that impact, but had he hit the wall head on, or even more squarely than he did on the driver's side, as you mentioned, Kurt Busch, Bubba's teammate, has been out for such a long time, now calling it an early career and not looking forward to racing full-time next year in the Cup Series. This was absolutely a dangerous move, intentional or not. We may not have that full evidence, but I think NASCAR was a bit lenient here in their 1-race suspension. Bubba Wallace certainly getting off a little easier than I would have liked to have seen for such a dangerous move.
Yeah, and the reality is that there's so there's so many different ways you could take a look at why this suspension is the way that it is, right? Where you have let's just admit it, right? You have a suspension that NASCAR said themselves is only because of the on-track incident between Wallace and Larson. Now, there was a bevy of things that happened during this event that warranted some discipline, right? We have first the intentional contact. I'm just going to name it. It was intentional. He hit the wall. He turned right and he right reared a guy, and he also took out a Toyota racing teammate in Bell trying to race for a championship. He was out of the race, and I think if it wasn't for Bell being there, Larson getting into him, he goes into the wall backwards. He hits this wall in the same place that Kurt Busch hits the wall in, and I don't know if you've seen it, and for our fans here on YouTube, I don't know if you've watched Radioactive this week from NASCAR, but it is some of the most gut-wrenching tones that you can get from a Radioactive segment. Cliff Daniels hopping on the radio telling Kyle Larson as he's getting hooked, as he's spinning towards the wall, Cliff Daniels hopping on the radio, put your head back before he hits the wall. Oh my goodness. If driver safety is not on the forefront of the conversation by now, my goodness, just hear the terror of the crew chief. Put your head back. My goodness, we did not worry about that 10 years ago. And it wasn't because of an ignorance to concussions. It wasn't an ignorance to head injuries. Have we gotten more aware of them? Sure. But guess what? We weren't afraid of them in this sport because the cars were safer. The cars were safer back then than what they are right now. And a crew chief shouldn't have to tell a driver, hey, put your head back and hope for the best as you're wrecking. Joey Logano hopped on multiple broadcasts this week and said very flagrantly, look, that could have cost him his career or his life, right? We've seen throughout history head injuries, traumatic head injuries, and cost drivers' careers, as you said, Kurt Busch this past week, and have cost drivers their lives. And unfortunately, that, like, the right rearing is so egregious, but that's just one thing. He gets out of the race car. He crosses an active racetrack. He walks all the way down through the infield, gets in an altercation. I'm not saying an altercation with Kyle Larson is a suspendable offense, right? I don't know. Find the guy. I don't know. It's kind of in line with the boys have at it thing, so I don't necessarily have a problem with guys scuffling. That's just me. But then walking back towards the infield, he kind of brushes off a safety crew member. You don't do that, and that's another offense. And NASCAR looked at this altercation and said, you know what, we're just going to go with the one race suspension based off of what happened on the racetrack. Well, David, there's a lot that happened on the racetrack that was more than just the actions of the car. And I think you're right. I think that there's a lot going on here that definitely could have warranted more. And ultimately, a point on NASCAR Race Hub that was made by different folks, and ultimately was made by Dale Earnhardt Jr. was that and I agree with it. I don't necessarily agree with the one race suspension because it doesn't necessarily hurt anybody. It gives Bubba Wallace a week off, which, sure, he gets to sit home and watch somebody else race his car. Okay, you get to feel bad about it, but next week you're going to be in the car. So what? That 45's racing for owner's championship. Nothing's changed. John Hunter Nemechek is going to race that car this week. It's still going to get owner's points. There was no owner's points penalty, and there's nothing bad that's happening to 2311 that would force that team's hand to take a look at Wallace and go, hey, these are the steps you need to make. All that we can hope as commentators, all that we can hope as NASCAR community is that this never happens again, right? this isn't the first time that this has happened, but my goodness, with this car, it needs to be the last.
It certainly does, and as you mentioned, the behavior afterwards. I'm all fine with drivers getting out of the car, um, yelling at each other, getting into an altercation if it comes down to it. But I really have to hand it to Kyle Larson. You could see it. He, of course, saw Bubba coming from a long way away as Bubba walked down the track, and you could just tell watching the broadcast by Kyle Larson's behavior. I will talk with him if that's what he wants to do. I will have that honest conversation. I feel that Larson was ready to perfectly admit, I ran out of talent. I shouldn't have run you up into the wall, but the frustration that had to be going through Larson's mind of then getting right rear quartered and the ability for him to set that aside for a moment, and with Bubba attacking him and getting into an altercation, trying to start a fight, Larson just says, you know what, man? No. Like, that's not what we do. That's not what this sport is about.
Well,
I made
anymore.
a mistake, but we just got to let it go. And Larson complying with the safety crew and just getting into the car, going to the infield care center. And even afterwards, they tried in the interview to kind of get a rise out of Larson, get a rise out of Bubba. Larson wasn't taking the bait. Bubba was still frustrated. You could tell in his interview, but Larson, being the person that he is, a champion in this sport, hey, that's not what I'm here for. I wanted to focus on my day of racing. Things happened. Let's move on. Let's look forward to Miami. So, great behavior on Larson's part. Again, just tremendous behavior out of a champion of the sport.
I also think a lot that has to do with that is Rick Hendrick, right? You race for Hendrick Motorsports, you act a certain way. You keep all your drama in-house, that's it. And it's always been how Rick Hendrick has drove that ship. And we saw it between Larson and Chase earlier this year. We've seen it between Larson and Byron this year, where there's drama that happens on the racetrack. And what happens? Nothing. You're ho-hum after the race, and we'll talk about it in the trailer. That's how Hendrick Motorsports deals with their stuff. I don't think Kyle Larson would have acted that way if his career trajectory stayed the way that it was going to stay before Kyle Larson's incident, right? But definitely Hendrick Motorsports has done a lot to shape him and to shape how he deals with adversity like this. And of course, Kyle Larson's done a lot of work behind the scenes as well to change how he acts as well. So ultimately, we want to hear from you down in the comments. There's certainly a lot to debate about when it comes to the Bubba Wallace versus Kyle Larson altercation at Las Vegas. Did NASCAR get it right? Did Wallace go too far, or how would you react for getting put in the wall? Could retaliation have happened, but maybe in a different way? How would you have handled it? Remember, real life racing, not sim racing, and it's much easier to do what happened on Sunday in a sim rig versus doing it on a real life racetrack. I can turn off the PC and just walk away if I really want to. Can't really do that on the NASCAR circuit. But David, we're going to take a look here moving forward in our show. We've spent quite a lot of time already talking about what was. Let's talk about what's gonna be moving forward into the week to come with Homestead Miami. Talk to us a little bit about the racetrack and tell us about last year's winner, and maybe he will be the first guy we keep an eye on.
So taking a look here at the Homestead Miami Speedway, we have a 1.5-mile oval asphalt surface, front stretch being a little over 1,700 feet, back straight being a little over 1,700 feet, 18 to 20 degree variable banking in these turns. Drivers are going to have a handful trying to find the right lines. Of course, they have a little bit of experience now with the tire compound as they're carrying that forward from Las Vegas. So crews will have a little bit of a setup in mind. But as you mentioned earlier in the show, at Vegas, or here at Miami, sorry, the next gen car is making its debut, and our winner from last time is William Byron. So we'll have to take a look, see what he can do in this new next gen car, and then of course see what this next gen car can bring to the Homestead Miami Speedway, and see what this car can really do at a track that we haven't seen it at yet. So interested to hear your thoughts and maybe a pick or two from the field looking ahead to Miami here this week.
Well, Homestead's been a very unique track in NASCAR's history, and I think that how you're going to drive this track is, once again, going to continually change. When we saw the iteration of this racetrack first come onto the NASCAR scene, it was pretty standard in how you attacked this racing surface and how you got around the racetrack. It was, of course, much like any other oval that you drive, and the fast way was around the bottom because the cars that we drove didn't depend so much on momentum. However, NASCAR has since evolved, and through the era of the car of tomorrow, as well as the last generation of NASCAR scenery, we got to see kind of the highline momentum, dirt track racing, hug the cushion all the way around, be the way to go, right? And we got to see drivers that have dirt track backgrounds really, really blossom at a track that is like this. Growing up as a Mark Martin fan, it always infuriated me when we went to Homestead, because I knew that he in his racing discipline would be the one of the few that would just be on the bottom the whole way around, and that was just how he raced. He was old school. But that wasn't the fastest. That wasn't the fastest. And if you are unwilling to change your line and to go find speed, you're gonna struggle. But as you said, the new car throws a whole new loop into this that we have no idea how drivers are going to attack this racetrack. What will tire wear look like? How will drivers maneuver around dirty air? How is this car going to react over the long run? Will the car make a long run? We have no idea. And yet, the driver's going to have to figure it out relatively quickly. Remember, we don't have like the days of old, multiple days of practice, happy hour, qualifying, another practice, and then the race, right? You have a half an hour practice, you got qualifying, and throw them in the garage and crank them up on Sunday. And ultimately, I think that's going to present quite a challenge for these drivers that are going to attack this track for the first time. David, with all that said, I know you asked me for picks, but I'm going to ask you for picks first. Who are your picks? Just a couple drivers to look out for here at Homestead.
So, not one of our championship drivers heading for the playoffs, but a driver that is really good at running the top line around some of these tracks, getting up there by the fence. Tyler Reddick. This guy is great at finding speed way up high at these tracks, just running right next to the wall in some cases. We saw it for sure in the old car, but I am looking forward to him finding some speed and especially bringing this car, this configuration to this track. We did see it a little bit at Las Vegas. I think that might be a telltale sign that this number 8 team isn't quite done this year. Of course, announcing all the things that are happening, Kyle Busch moving over to the 8 and Tyler Reddick getting that ride over at 2311 and all the shifts that have happened recently. But it's another week, right? The 8 team still out there doing what they do, ran hard at Vegas. I don't expect anything less here at Miami. Setting those cars up is going to be the challenge. As you mentioned, 30 minutes of practice, qualifying. Just going to have to see what they can do, but this is the guy. If anybody can figure it out, can get that speed and run that high line, I think we have Tyler Reddick this week.
Yeah, and you stole my pick. Tyler Reddick is in my mind, the clear-cut favorite going into this week, right? In a season where there is so much parity, it is so hard to predict new winners. It's so hard to predict trends. This week's kind of easy. This week's kind of easy, right? Where we get to just have what we know, have the track layout, and go, who's the best at what this used to be? Well, it's Tyler Reddick. Even though William Byron did win this race, he came out this week and said, I feel really good about winning here. Well, buddy, you might have to if you want to go to the Final Four. But regardless, I think it's a non-playoff driver that wins this week. I'm really interested to see what Reddick does in managing his stuff. Kyle Larson's also really good with his dirt background. That 5 team really needs a good rebound, especially after everything that's just happened. But they really have not had a good stretch as of late. So I think they're due for a good turnaround. I also think another driver to take a look out for, and again, another non-playoff driver, is Kyle Busch. And let me say why. Because when we think about dirt disciplines and we think about being able to race the fence, we don't normally think about Kyle Busch. But you know what? I think in one of these last races, right? We have Homestead, we have Martinsville, and we have Phoenix. I think Kyle's going to win one more with Joe Gibbs. And that 18 crew is going to find their magic one more time. And I'm pretty certain that this week would be their best week to do it. Especially with Martinsville now being the cut-off race, you're going to have too many playoff drivers just going wild. I don't think there's a whole lot of room for non-playoff drivers to win that race. I would take a look at Kyle Busch to go out there and maybe snag this one.
A very interesting choice, and I can't think of any other team that has worked harder than that number 8 team the 18 team to get out there and really show what they're made of. And they've just been plagued with so many issues this year, especially this last week here at Vegas, having a tire come off of the car. So cutting down on that crew, it would certainly make for a huge story here at Miami to have a short crew then picking up the slack and making their way to victory lane at Miami. So something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we do talk about on this show some iRacing news, and I found a pretty interesting story. It is about a week old, but definitely one worth mentioning because we were covering the NASCAR Coca-Cola Series coverage last week, and we missed a very important headline that is worth mentioning. We got to talk at length about how these drivers in the highest discipline of NASCAR racing on iRacing get to go toe-to-toe for a big cash prize and a very prestigious championship trophy. And these are the top of the top, right? But way back in the day, there was one real-life NASCAR driver that worked hard to make iRacing in its infancy what it is today, and that's Dale Earnhardt Jr. Of course, more recently, he's advocated for the restoration of North Wilkesboro to be put into the virtual world. That happened, and guess what? North Wilkesboro hosting the All-Star race next year in NASCAR's highest field. And Junior's talked about at length about how this is a tool and drivers have used this. And I can't wait to talk to you more, maybe in the off season, David, about how different teams are using iRacing to prepare for the next season. And there's just so much to go through when talking about how closely iRacing has been integrated into NASCAR's highest levels. And it can nearly all be traced back to one superstar, and that would be Dale Earnhardt Jr. And so what iRacing did this past week was announce that their championship trophy is going to be named after their ambassador, Dale Earnhardt Jr. So no longer are they just simply racing for a trophy named after the series namesake, but rather the competitors are going after the inaugural Dale Earnhardt Jr. Trophy. And I think that they got to work on the name a little bit. It's a little wordy, but in my opinion, I couldn't think of a better ambassador of the sport to name that discipline of racing's highest trophy after.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, a great advocate for preserving a track such as North Wilkesboro there on the iRacing service, getting an opportunity to preserve some history, but just all the things that Dale has done over the years. You mentioned in the infancy of iRacing, Dale was a huge advocate for making sure things were done the right way, trying to get this sim to be everything that it really could be. And now we get to see the result, right? As guys that race on this service ourselves, and as most of our viewers, I'm sure, have spent plenty of hours in this sim, where would we be without such an influential figure as Dale Jr. just picking up this torch and saying, I want this to be the premier simulation of NASCAR, and then carrying that torch forward and continuing to be an ambassador, right? So, as you know, Dale is a huge advocate for these older tracks and going out and exploring and finding some of these places that have history within NASCAR's former schedules. North Wilkesboro Speedway, when Dale went originally a few years ago, was abandoned. There was nothing. It was run down, needed tons of repair. Dale advocating, hey, let's preserve this on iRacing, and putting the time in and bringing awareness and bringing people back to that history of early NASCAR and North Wilkesboro. Not only was he able to revive it, as you mentioned, for a real-life race coming up here for the All-Star race, but he put it on the iRacing service to share with a community and really get people excited about it. And I can't think, as you mentioned, I can't think of a better figure, sim racing or from the NASCAR Cup Series itself, to name this trophy after. And certainly Dale has done plenty for this sport and for iRacing overall. So it's great to see him finally get some recognition and a little piece that he can kind of, hey, that's me. I got to put my name and attach it to the trophy that these champions get. So congrats to Dale, of course, on being the namesake for the trophy. And then we'll have to keep an eye on who gets to take that first trophy home.
Yeah, certainly a prestigious award for sure. Who would have thought all those years ago in the garage, playing on his computer, having his dad come over and say, stop playing those video games, that it would turn into what it turned into today. And most certainly, we have Dale Jr. to thank, and many more people, for that matter, to thank for the iRacing service that we so enjoy bringing to life here on Sim Racing Media. Speaking about what we do here on Sim Racing Media, David, we get to talk about this week on SRM, and we are pretty busy here on the network, but one thing I did want to talk about with you, and this isn't something that you and I are going to take advantage of because all of our friends are far away, but we're going to talk about that. Actually, we're going to talk very briefly about how Sim Racing Media facilitates a family environment when it comes to the workers of the company. And this weekend, many of our friends here on the show, or on the channel rather, are at Homestead, Miami. They're going to be enjoying the Cup race and each other's company, and friends from far and wide that have passions for racing and commentary get to come together and enjoy life. Now, you go to school and I got kiddos, so yeah, we're holding down the fort, guys. But regardless, just talk briefly about, for anybody that might be interested in broadcasting and becoming part of the Sim Racing Media family, just talk to the folks out there and say, based on what's going on this weekend, what sets Sim Racing Media apart as a group, as a family, getting along with one another, trying to make that a priority?
So, Zach, of course, as you know, Sim Racing Media, the crew behind the scenes, we all have kind of our own little side conversations within Discord. And what's great about that is we get to know each other, we get to converse, and week to week we see comments. Oh, did you see this happening while the race is going on Sundays? And then we get to have discussions, and of course that leads us to some of our conversations here on Mic Check sometimes, and get the great insight of some of our team members. But on top of that, week to week, usually around the Saturday time frame, Sim Racing Media as a crew sets some time aside and says, all right, we're going to take this one night a week. We're very light on shows for Saturdays for this reason, so that the crew can get together, we can socialize, and just be that family, that community, talk with each other, play some games, and just really get to know each other. And if you're interested in broadcasting, interested in what we do here with Sim Racing Media, I certainly hope that you would leave a comment here in this video, find us on our Discord channel, have a chat with the ownership here at Sim Racing Media. Great guys, get in touch with them. Maybe you have some ideas. For Zach and I, we had this idea quite a while ago, and here we are now. So you never know where those opportunities can lead. And certainly, if you are interested in finding out more, hit those guys up. They're more than willing to talk with you, and we'd love to see you as part of our SRM family here on YouTube and anywhere else you might be able to catch us.
Yeah, and friends as well. Just know that we would, if you're interested in commentary work or production work, or if you're just if you're curious about, hey, how do you guys do all that you do? We would love to have a conversation with you. So as David said, reach out to us on Twitter, Facebook, here on YouTube. We're pretty much everywhere, and we'd love to have a conversation with you about how our passion for iRacing and real life disciplines in racing come to life right here on Sim Racing Media. And we love to do it together. And I think that that can be seen the most this weekend as our Sim Racing Media family is over at Homestead, and David and I are here on Mic Check. But anyway, I am happy to hold down the fort here with you, David. And as we turn off today's show, just know that for my partner, David, and I, it's been a privilege to be here on the show with you. And if you like what you see, please like, comment, and subscribe. We'd love to talk to you down in the comments, and there's certainly a lot to talk about. So feel free to converse, and we would love to talk to you about the week that was and the week that is, and really get to know you a little bit more. But just make sure that your mic's on before you talk, because it never hurts to get a mic check every now and again. My name is Zach, and for my partner David, we'll talk to you later. Bye.